As far as my topic here is concerned, I'm very glad to be here. And as you can see, it's a very old slide. I've given for the first time this presentation, as we have heard yesterday, on several occasions. For example, the first time in Beijing in 2008. Nothing very great has changed in the approach. So we will carry on. So as you can see, an old PowerPoint presentation may still be valid. It has to be refreshed sometimes. And right now, I'm not the younger generation that can very easily handle the updates. But nevertheless, all I have written down here in Beijing in 2008 is still valid. So after 12 years. So that means the wisdom that you consider right now can still be utilized. Now, the topic is project proposal writing. What are the projects? And we have learned yesterday how to make a PhD. Once you enter and you have the PhD, then you need to do a project proposal to some people that can give us some funding for your work, whether you are in academic employment or whether you are even in industry. And I will address the following topics. What is a proposal? The types of a proposal, the contents of a proposal, the evaluation process, and finally, what you should do and what you should not do. So,
Gottfried, sorry, maybe you can go to the presentation mode on the lower bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, the presentation mode for the PowerPoint.
Where do I find it?
There's a bar on the lower part of it. There's a bar.
Here.
No. Erst Notizen, dann anschließend sind das, ja.
Yeah, four signs, the most right one.
Yeah.
Is the right one.
Das ist das.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. Great. Thank you.
Better. So what is a proposal? A proposal is, the purpose of a proposal is to persuade the reader of the proposal to do something. And in most countries, it is a sponsor and he can give you a grant, or he will provide the funds that you can do the proposed work. And so a proposal is written as a document to a sponsor. And the sponsor may be public. In most of our countries, we have public sponsors, but it can also be a private sponsor. For example, the public sponsors in the United States of America are the National Science Foundation. In Europe, we have the European Union programs. And on the framework, I don't know whether it's still 6, but it was introduced as Framework 6. And they're the National Research Councils that you have. For example, we have, in Canada, you have the National Research Council of Canada. And in Germany, you have the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft. And in England, you have the British Council, and many other countries have very similar programs. Now, it's very difficult sometimes to get the sponsors. Private sponsors, they're also there. And there's something very interesting. It's a very interesting situation in the United States. It's very interesting that in the US, you have 43,000 private foundations that award at least $8 billion annually. And these established by about 1/3 of the 2.5 million United States corporations. And I wish we had something like that in Europe also. Unfortunately, our lawmakers did not decide on that. But in the United States, there's a US federal law that 5% of the market value assets or the interest income which a company obtains, whichever is higher, must be turned over to a non-profit organization. And they can determine what sort of a grant they will sponsor under legal constraints. So it's totally free, this, but nevertheless, it's very possible to find out over the internet what the sponsoring conditions are and the legal constraints. So then the sponsor determines the type and the purpose of the funding. So it can be, depending upon the profession that we are associated with, can be for fundamental research. And fundamental research will take its effect, even the times are very fast nowadays, but in perhaps 25 years. In Germany, the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft gives out the fundamental research grants. And in engineering, we are more target-oriented. We are under applied research. That is, the returns are expected in about 15 years, and the outcome is predictable, which is not the case in fundamental research. When you're researching something, maybe you will find out that it cannot be done. Once this is public institutions, for example, the German Space Research Organization right now under ESA, that is working under tight schedule, expected with the results 15 years. Space program is geared at least 10 to 15 years like that. So applied research is then possible. You can predict what certain sponsors like to have to measure the environment or remote sensing tools. And when it comes to development, in development, returns are expected in about 5 years. I did not understand. Did you ask a question?
Sorry, there was just some background noise.
Background
so please
noise,
proceed.
okay. Now, the development returns are expected by industry. So when you are working for industry, particularly when you perhaps are engaged in industry, then you should really have the proposal addressed toward development. And if you are working for the practitioners, then the returns are expected on project completion immediately, in a year or two. So fundamental research is mostly funded as a grant with no obligation. For example, the National Science Foundation funds on merit and not on need. Types of proposal. Applied research, development projects, and practical implementations are usually funded as a contract with delivery obligations. They will predict what you have to provide. While public grants and contracts are more regulated in the form or purpose, the applications are usually require prescribed forms. And the proposal should be, depending upon in which country and under which sponsor you are, between 15 and 100 pages long. Private grants are usually satisfied with a shorter letter of proposal. Okay, now how do you find out about the types of proposals? The internet contains many references for writing project proposals, most of which are from the US, which even started fundraising or finding a sponsor. And here's a long list of examples of a school library projects in the USA, for which grant application must be made by school districts, and their success is based on the quality of the application. And there are some of these. For example, state of New York obtained $1 per student, California 37, Oklahoma 70, and Alaska $132 per student. So the conditions are rather similar. And there's a whole list of other internet references. Maybe some of them are not working anymore, but there's some examples and you may find some new ones. So I can just, in non-US internet references are Scottish Enterprise in Scotland or in Europe, Research Index, Funding AAU in Denmark, or in the UK, Monash University, and in Israel as well. The contents of a proposal. The web recommends, and they are all similar recommendations for the preparations of the contents of a proposal for a government grant or contract. What you have to do is step 1, write for application forms and guidelines if they're not available on the internet. There's usually, you know what the foundation is or the agency, and then you can write to them. In order to find out what the success rates are, if you know a past grantee, you can ask his email, then you can perhaps ask him whether he is helpful in getting you some tips. Also, you can call a past reviewer, and some of the professors are certainly reviewers of certain grants. Or you can call the program officer of that particular program. And once you have the information, then you can start writing the proposal. First, an introduction, who you are, what your goals are. You prove your credibility with your exam qualifications, state of publications, and so forth, and state the problem that you want to solve. The problem statement and the need. You have to demonstrate your understanding of what the problem is. You focus on the project in relation to larger problems, and you may say something about the importance of the project, the feasibility to solve the problem, and finally the aim to be reached by the proposal. Then, as far as the objectives are concerned, specify the end product. Is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it practical? Is it logical? And the methods to be used for data collection and use, the evaluation to improve the project. Then you need to have a budget. And finally, at last, you should write the abstract. So, letter proposal for a private sponsor may not need such forms. They are not available, but they should contain a similar outline. You should have a summary, the self-identification, the uniqueness, the sponsor expectations, and also a budget. A sponsor appeal, why you approach particularly this sponsor, the problem, the solution, to demonstrate the capabilities and demonstrate your credibility, and then your budget and your conclusion. Also, it may be useful to find out in the process of your question, perhaps you're not as well known in publications, so you should include perhaps as a joint multiple application some sort of a heavyweight person who at least adds credibility. So you can do that. As a rule, the applications are then reviewed by a group of experts. And there is a summary in statistics that simply say 58% were rejected because of the statement of the problem. The problem is not important, or the problem is too complex, and it is only of logical significance, or maybe sometimes it's premature, cannot be solved. The other possibility is 75% are rejected on account of the approach. The unsuitable methods are being used. The description is too nebulous, not thought out. In 50% of the cases, it's the investigator himself. He has not sufficient experience. He is unfamiliar with literature, has a poor publication record. And 16% right now rejected because the resource assessment is unrealistic. And now we come to the do's and don'ts. I think you should stress additional interesting technology of components to proven ideas. And you should also know how to fit into past and current projects and involve a team and proofread a submission thoroughly by all the team members. In all these presentations, you should say there's little known or done, or give the impression that you think you know everything, and confuse objectives with actions. Define objectives you do not wish to achieve, and for example, don't use abbreviations. You can use them further on, but first of all, you have to clarify what each abbreviation means. And then focus on the cutting edge, and do not request funding for basic operations. And this must be the infrastructure that you are working with, but you cannot ask for infrastructure. So this is my summary of project proposal ideas, and I would be very glad if in your lifetime career you will find out you will write many, many proposals. And the components that you have listed here, they're always the same. There may be different proposals, but nevertheless, you should observe these objectives to write a good proposal. Very similar like to write a good thesis. Thank you very much.